When it comes to talking hoops, Amin Elhassan is one of my favorite guys in the business to be talking hoops with. He's nice enough to join us here on Damon and Ratto. He's with Meadowlark Media. You can check him out on Sirius XM NBA Radio. Amin, thank you for joining us, and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you guys, too. It's the long summer of does Durant hate his team, and will Russell Westbrook get traded, and all that stuff is behind us, and now we actually get real basketball.
You know, it's funny. You know, it is a long summer for pretty much everyone in the league but two teams that reach the NBA Finals, in which case the offseason goes by in the blink of an eye. And normally it's got that, man, I can't believe how soon it's starting feeling to it. But this year, with everything that the Warriors just went through with Draymond and Jordan and in practice a couple of weeks ago, this season all of a sudden went from it's coming too soon to couldn't come fast enough. And I think the Warriors are just dying to return this to a basketball conversation.
Yeah, anything that's not talking about contracts or people punching people or any of that stuff, right? Let's get back to playing basketball, reminding everyone why the Warriors are lovable, right? Because that's kind of the weird thing about the last couple of weeks is more than anything, that lovable kind of Warriors tag has been stripped. And now we have conversations about a hostile work environments and the cost of winning and you know, is it possible? You know, it kind of highlights on some level the frustrations of being excellent for so long. At some point, you know, these relationships start to fray.
As somebody who did his time in a front office and dealt with front office people from other teams for as long as you did, and probably still do to a certain extent, how do you think the Warriors handled getting out of the predicament that Green put them in?
Man, Ray, that's a good question but it's a tough question to answer because I don't know how everyone feels behind the scenes. And what I mean by that is, on the one hand, what Draymond did was inexcusable, and you know, you don't hit people that hard. Like that's someone, you know. First of all, before I saw the video, it was described to me as a cartoonishly aggressive punch. And when seeing the video, I'm like, yeah, that's exactly what it looks like. And you know, because I can't stress this enough, and I've kind of been on a little bit of an island in saying this. Fights happen. Fist fights happen in NBA practices all the time. When you see guys in games do the hold me back and shoving each other, that's not because they don't know how to fight. It's because the league has successfully legislated fighting out of our game through fines and suspensions. So guys think twice about doing that. But that doesn't mean they don't know how to fight or that fights don't occur. And so the news that Draymond punched Jordan Poole did not shock me. Because I'm like, yeah, it's an NBA practice. It happens. Guys get testy and then somebody hauls off and punches somebody else. But seeing it, that's not a regular, you're pissing me off, let's fight. That's I'm dealing with some other stuff. That's the kind of, like my buddy said, that's the kind of punch you do when you're fighting someone you don't know. When you're literally fighting for your life, not I'm going to whoop your ass kind of thing of someone I do know. So, given that fighting is prevalent, but that seemed to be cross a line, the biggest thing is how does Jordan Poole absorb all this? Does he take it as, yeah, it's a practice fight, no big whoop? Is he like, I don't trust this guy anymore? I don't know that level of his feeling. So for them to come to that conclusion, it tells me, at least on a superficial level, that everyone involved in that is okay with it. They've accepted it as this is just an NBA fight. He did something wrong. He's going to get punished for it, but we don't need to further complicate issues by taking a strong stand and suspending him, because at the end of the day, who are we trying to appease in that moment? Some outside forces, some yahoos on a radio show or on a TV show or whatever. That doesn't make sense. So that's a long way of saying they are all cool with it, and I'm cool with it too.
Amin Elhassan here on 95.7 The Game. And again, that's kind of the way that we were talking about this in its conclusion. If the team wants to move on and is good with moving on, and Jordan Poole is endorsing all of that, who are we to say they're getting it wrong? Like, they've officially earned an awful lot of house credit. Steve Kerr said that this was the biggest crisis of his coaching career. And at all times during Steve Kerr's career, when something's going wrong, he's got one tent post to truly lean on, and that's Steph Curry. How much do you think how much do you think Steph is the reason why topics like this don't swallow this franchise alive? Because I truly think he is about as perfect and unique a leader as the NBA's had in a really long time. Like, he's Duncan level perfect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's what Steve compares him to a lot. That temperament, that even-keeled temperament that allows you to steady yourself, because the locker room follows the leader. When they see the leader is unfazed and unflappable, they're able to absorb and move past things that otherwise probably people would not. Now, having said that, from what I understand, Steph was moved by this occurrence. It wasn't a kind of, well, that's just practice. He didn't take it like that.
No.
Which, again, further doubles down on, if they're okay with it, then I've got to be okay with it too, because if Steph Curry, who was kind of moved by this, and we know his influence and his voice in that organization, and they went with this punishment, then that means he co-signed on that as well, feeling like the point has been made, or that Draymond has atoned enough, or whatever it is. But, it's when Steve Kerr says this is the biggest crisis, that kind of flips you guys on the other end. Like, wait, this is the biggest crisis? I would have thought, dealing with Durant last season, that felt like the biggest crisis that they went through, given how miserable everyone seemed to be during that time. And obviously the prospect of losing an all-time great. The fact that this registers on his radar that loudly is a little confusing to me, given that the punishment is going to withhold some of your check and you're going to say you're sorry. So it's kind of mixed messages, I guess.
Given your knowledge of how teams negotiate with players who are going to be in Jordan Poole's situation, did the Warriors overpay him by trying to lock him up now? Would he have been a $30 million player if none of this had happened?
I believe so. I don't think this contract in any way reflects Jordan's victimhood. This is about basketball. If you look at the comps around the league, Tyler Hero and R.J. Barrett, those guys are roughly around the same caliber player. One guy might have this guy 1, 2, 3. Another person might have them ranked differently, but they're pretty close as caliber players at this point. The going rate was $130 million. Now, the interesting thing about Jordan's contract is the initial reports we heard was $140 million. Wow, he got more than those other guys. But when you do the digging into the incentive structures in there, it's almost impossible that he's going to get anywhere near $140. No, I'm sorry. It's not almost impossible. It's impossible. Because $3 million per year, that's $12 million total of his incentives are for winning MVP, winning Defensive Player of the Year, and being All-NBA and All-NBA and All-Defensive Team. So that's 4 different incentives that total up to $3 million per year. So in order for him to make those $12 million total, he literally needs to be MVP of the league 4 years in a row, Defensive Player of the Year 4 years in a row, and All-NBA 4 years in a row, and All-Defensive Team 4 years. That's not going to happen. And quite likely, none of those things are going to happen. The most likely is he'll be an All-NBA player. That's a very optimistic appraisal of Jordan Poole, saying he'll be an All-NBA player. But he's not an MVP, and he's not a defensive player. So why are we giving him credit in his contract for these things that he'll never meet? The other incentives are way more achievable. There's $250K for playing in 65 games, and the team wins at least 52 games. $250K for playing in 65 games, and the team makes it to the playoffs. $250K for playing in 65 games and making it to the second round, et cetera, et cetera. So there are ones that are a lot more achievable, but the bulk of that, $17 million delta between 123 his base and 140 his incentives are made up just la-la land fiction, like the wildest dreams and fantasies. So when you look at it in that lens, you begin to say, oh, yeah, his contract is in line, if not a little cheaper than his peers.
Hey, all he's got to do is, drop 35 a night off the bench. MVP could be his. You never know. Amin Elhassan with us here on 95.7 The Game. And we have very little time left. So I'd just like a prediction on Draymond's year, if you will. And out of the Western Conference, who do you think is the biggest challenger to the Warriors' throne that's not the Los Angeles Clippers?
Draymond is going to be interesting because, again, as he moved past this incident, he referenced in his press conference, his original press conference, that he's going through some stuff in his personal life, and that in part fueled the uncontrollable rage he felt on that day. Is that resolved? Is he still dealing with that? How will that manifest itself in the rest of for the rest of the season? Those are really important questions, but I would point out that Draymond, more than most guys, is able to focus and play basketball at a very high level despite being angry or upset or anything like that. Now, he does have high-profile instances when that backfires on him. See 2 weeks ago, so it remains to be seen if it will manifest itself again during the season. The biggest challenger, not named the Clippers, I guess you'd have to say the Denver Nuggets. Jokic is a reigning two-time MVP, and I've been kind of classifying this season as the Avengers Endgame scene where the portals open and all the people who were lost to the Thanos snap are walking through those portals. So John Wall and Kawhi Leonard and Michael Porter Jr. and Jamal Murray and Ben Simmons.
It's like the Patino game. It's the Patino game.
They're all walking through that door now. So that changes basically the landscape of the league, and particularly in the Western Conference where there's more than a couple of those guys walking through those doors. So, I think I'm going to go with Denver outside of the Clippers, obviously. But, I don't know how good New Orleans is going to be. And that sounds crazy, right? I don't know how good Dallas can be. And so on and so forth. The Western Conference is, surprise, surprise, a war zone.
Amin, cheers to you, man. Thank you so much for joining us here as we're tipping off an NBA season. Meant a lot. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Really appreciate it.